Greetings once again. These are the quick questions. We are designing an RPG called Downbelow, sci-fi cyberpunk with a unique narrative, non-random, non-dice-based system. I am Ian. I designed the system.
I'm Steve. I talk about interesting people, places, and things.
So, today I'm going to answer a question.
Alright, and that question is... You've been handling a lot of the system necessities, stuff that needs to happen to make the story go, to make the game work.
Yep.
What is something that we have not covered yet in the rules, a rules space, if you will, that you would like to see represented that we just haven't had the chance yet? You have 5 minutes, starting now.
Alright, so something that has been touched on a little bit in the written down rules that you can find on our Patreon page, but we haven't really talked about it much in these videos, is the consequences of failure, and how to scale them, and why to scale them. And in a previous iteration of the system, we had a more in-depth system for this, where the tension would rise as people failed at actions and eventually would break and cause a certain level of loss. And we threw that out because it was overcomplicated and didn't really flow very well.
Even though I liked it, it just didn't click.
Yeah, there was too much. So now, anytime you fail, you could theoretically lose everything, except that it shouldn't be anytime you fail, you die.
That just gets punitive.
It shouldn't be anytime you fail, nothing happens, because
That's
would
boring.
be dumb. It wouldn't be a failure. But there should be some times that you fail where all that happens is you didn't succeed. What are you going to do now? And there should be some times that you fail when your character dies. And a core important thing about this area of the rules that we need to define more about, that I haven't really yet, is that this needs to be obvious to the players. If nothing else, when this situation comes up, if the player is trying to decide whether they are going to try and succeed at this challenge or whether they're going to allow it to fail, they should be able to ask the GM and get a clear answer as a player, that their character doesn't necessarily know all of the answers to this, but they should get a clear answer as a player. If I choose to have my character fail this action, what will they suffer as a result of that failure? Even if... sorry about talking over. Let me finish this thought real quick. Even if the information that would have to be told to them for them to know this is impossible for their character to know, the GM should tell them, your character does not know this, but, and then tell them what will happen to their character. Because in this system, one of the core conceits of this narrative system is that the players are helping craft the story in a role that is usually exclusively the GM's, because they are deciding success or failure, and in order to make that decision, they have to have that information.
Just briefly touching on this for the sake of people who are tuning in for the first time or who maybe missed certain parts of this, it's important to note that this is not a role-playing game in the same exact vein as Dungeons & Dragons, where the random die rolls will determine what's happening on any given granular moment. This is more about crafting the story than crafting each individual moment in the story. The aha moments, the twists, the turns, as opposed to the investigation rolls of a hallway 10 feet wide by 150 feet long.
And so depending on the situation, a single choice whether to succeed or fail might represent a single punch being thrown at a single person, or it might represent an entire fight. It might represent a single clue being found, or it might represent an entire crime scene investigation. So, on the side of what you lose if you fail, this should be dependent on the situation, and it should be built up to in the story. And the concept of building tension and then breaking it is something that we need to address in the new simplified version of the system. It's just not going to be addressed the same way. Essentially, there should be times and places for players to lose certain things, to have their characters lose certain things, and it should be after a certain amount of build-up. there is room for the sudden wham! Your contact got hit by a car and now your best friend's in the hospital. There's room for that kind of thing in the story, but there also needs to be space after that where not everything is a crucial life or death action.
Jumping in really quickly, you mentioned that there are some situations where if a player chooses to fail, their character might simply die.
Mm-hmm.
Is there the option to somehow mitigate this through GM and player conference without spending successes, or are spending successes the only way to do it?
In terms of the results of an action, there is always a negotiation between player and GM, and it's entirely dependent on the situation and the nature of the actions being taken, and there will be times, I believe that there will be times when it will be reasonable for the GM to say, no, there is no way for us to mitigate this. You either succeed or you die. But there will also be times when, yes, without spending successes, you can mitigate it. So the answer is both. There will be times for both of those things, I believe.
And there you have it, 5 minutes of rule discussion plus obligatory bonus question at the end. Until next time, I'm Steve.
And we are down below.